Hot Flashes and Cool Topics, a podcast for women in midlife and beyond. At Hot Flashes and Cool Topics, we talk about anything and everything to do with midlife. My name is Bridget.
And I'm Colleen.
And today we are talking to Leslie Ferris Yerger. Leslie is a stage 4 cancer survivor. And when she got this diagnosis, she just really felt a lot of things needed to be better for women. And she has started just a whole list, a whole website. She's an author, and Colleen will share a little bit more about that with you.
Yes, so, Leslie went from getting an all-clear mammogram and 2 months later finding out she had stage 4 metastatic.
Or was it 2 weeks? Was it 2 months? I can't remember if she said 2 weeks or 2 months. Okay.
Basically, she'll tell you the story, but it was basically that she went for a bone density test, which at 55 is a very common baseline test. I've had a bone density. I mean, menopause will cause you to lose bone mass, and found out that she had bone cancer. Originally, they thought that was the primary cancer, and then they discovered, no, it was in fact breast cancer. So she's going to tell you the whole story. We obviously don't want to tell it for her, but in her journey, she discovered, wow, I have dense breasts, and 2/3 of women pre-menopausal have dense breasts, and half of the women postmenopausal do, and a lot don't know about it. Now, Bridget and I have talked about last year, because this is October, it's Breast Cancer Awareness Month. Bridget interviewed a breast cancer survivor last year, which was a great story. You guys should check that out. I've written blogs about my own relationship with my boobs, and not, I've had a lump removed. I have dense breasts. Luckily, I do know that I have dense breasts. But she talks about the fact that a mammogram and an ultrasound, which are things I usually get, are just not sufficient. There are options. There are tools out there that the insurance companies are not covering, that we as women need to go out and advocate for our own health. Bridget and I get on soapbox all the time about insurance because we're just sick of it. Like, preventative care is so much more cost effective than a stage 4 cancer diagnosis. It just makes no sense to either one of us. So she talks about that. She talks about walking a 500-mile Camino de Santiago, Spain walk, having no idea where she was going to stay at night.
Oh yeah.
Go ahead. What were you going to say?
Oh, my mother-in-law did that walk, but
Really?
she did know where she was going. She didn't do the whole 500 miles, but she went with the tour group. So Leslie's adventure
by herself, it sounded
very different. Yes. Didn't know where she was going to stay every night. And just a side note, there is a movie with Martin Sheen called The Way, and it talks about that pilgrimage. So just a little side note. Yeah, check that out.
She's also written a book, Probably Benign, which kind of weaves the story of her walk, uses it as a metaphor for her journey through cancer. Luckily, she's doing well now. But, we all have some story that we have heard, or a person that we know who has struggled with breast cancer or lost the fight to breast cancer. And education is power. Know what's out there for you. Don't just, like she said, she just said, okay, well, I'm clear. See you next year. And that wasn't the case. Yeah. And how frightening is that, And so listen to the story, take some words of wisdom from what she has to say. Know your body, check your breasts, check your boobs, as they say. You know what you feel. And if something doesn't feel right, or if you have pain or any kind of weird rash or something, go talk. And if they don't listen, go to another doctor. Because
Absolutely.
Be your own best advocate. She talks about it. Let's let her, she's wiser than we are on this subject.
On this subject, yes.
We're going to let her start the story.
Welcome to Hot Flashes and Cool Topics. Today we have Leslie Ferris Yerger, and she is a speaker and an author of Disrupting the Status Quo in Breast Cancer Screening. So thank you so much, Leslie, for being on our show.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to be here.
And I am just so amazed just learning a little bit about your background and what happened with you. And just amazed really hearing about how mammography is not the end-all be-all to diagnosing breast cancer. And it's so funny. I just read, it's not funny at all, but I just read, it's in a coincidence, I read this book, The Body by Bill Bryson. I don't know if you're familiar with any of Bill Bryson's stories. And this one is like, it's a big book. But he speaks in there about how mammography is really not it's one of the only tools almost, but we'll hear more from you about this, but how it's not really reliable. So can you share with our listeners your story and how you found out how unreliable it can be?
Sure, you bet. So November of 2017, going on 2.5, almost 3 years ago now, I was diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer. And that was 2 months after an all clear mammogram and ultrasound. And so I got that call, all clear, see you next year. Mm-hmm. And of course, what I heard is the words that they said, but what I also heard, and what every other woman also hears when they get those phone calls, is that, oh, thank God I don't have breast cancer. That's what we really hear, because that's what we want to know, mm-hmm. right? So of course I said that to myself and completely disregarded it, and until next time. But then my doctor ordered a bone density scan for no reason other than precautionary, because I was postmenopausal at the age of 55, and he said, let's get you a bone, bone density scan to baseline to see where your bones are now. And as you grow older, we ladies tend to lose bone mass. But if we don't do the pictures now, we won't have anything to compare it to. We won't know if you're losing or not. So I thought that was pretty reasonable. So I went and quickly got the bone density scan. And then one thing led to another after that, because they saw weird things in my bone from the bone density scan, X-ray, CT scan, multiple tests for multiple myeloma, which is what it looked like, which is bone cancer, all negative. Bone biopsy, breast cancer cells in the bone. So when you have breast cancer cells in your bones, that means your breast cancer has metastasized or gone to your bones. It doesn't mean you have bone cancer. You have metastatic breast cancer. So that's a point of confusion right there. Mm-hmm. So then after that, I went to the Mayo Clinic because I thought, wow, I'm so confused now. I don't know what's going on, right? As you can imagine. And quickly they confirmed the diagnosis. Yes, that was exactly what I had. But there I began to learn, what I wish everyone knew now. And that is, for women with dense breasts, and that is, on average, half of us, but 2/3 of premenopausal women have dense breasts. But that's a lot of people in the prime of their lives, right? Mammography will find less than half of all cancers present. And that's also true of 3D mammography. Wow. Scary as that is the truth. And that's what I want people to know. So for women with dense breasts, mammography is just not enough. And what I'm spending the rest of my life trying to get women to understand and to promote and trying to disrupt, the status quo, is we need to start with mammography. And then for those women who have dense breasts, they need additional screening in order for that phone call, what we hear in that phone call, to be actually true. I don't have breast cancer. Right now, that's what we hear. It might not be true. Other tests can get us a lot closer to that being true. So that's what I'm all about.
Did you go back to your doctor that does the mammograms to show them what they missed?
Well, that's interesting. I'm so glad you asked that question. So when I was up at Mayo, I said to my doctor there, I said, how can this be? Like, how can this have happened? And he said, and I quote, a mammogram is like shining light through concrete. What good is it really? Wow. So that was a bit of a overstatement. It was kind of an emotional thing. What the better statement really is in women with dense breasts, it can be like shining light through concrete. So for women who don't have dense breasts, mammograms are perfectly fine. And the reason is that if they're not dense, then their breasts are mainly fatty. And in a mammogram picture, a fatty breast looks black or gray, and breast cancer is white.
Okay.
So you can see that white on the gray background super easy, right? But in dense breast, the density, which is all of the other stuff that's in our breast, the glands, the ducts, the lobules, all that kind of stuff that is what your breast is for, to make milk. If you have a lot of that in your breast, that appears white, and so does cancer.
Okay.
So the cancer gets muddled up, and you can't really see one from the other in the mammogram picture. And that's what he really meant. And then the next thing he said to me was, so I'm getting back to answering your question now. This is not the fault of anyone. This is the fault of our technology. So it wasn't like if they stared at that mammogram long enough that they would see it. They wouldn't. It's like it's not there. It's masked. I mean, you can't expect people to see things that aren't there. I mean, these people are highly trained, experienced, you know, and smart professional people, but they don't have bionic eyes. They can't see something that's masked, that's not there. So it's really not their fault. They are being given poor technology to use. And there are some radiologists who will not read mammograms for that very reason.
And you also said that you said 3D, and then, like, you know, I've gone for mammograms, Colleen has too. Yeah. We always have to do the follow-up with the ultrasound. It didn't show up there either. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. That's correct. Ultrasound, you know, we'll find on average two more cancers per 1,000 women. So it's not a ton more, but I say 2 more is 2 more. Okay.
Right.
Like,
yeah.
if you want to lives 2 women, you know, then let's do it. It's some breast care centers won't even do ultrasound because they say there's so many false positives, it doesn't find enough, it's not worth it. Other places swear by it. It's pretty operator dependent too. If you have a really good operator, they're going to find more than one who's less experienced or, you know, not as good for whatever reasons, training or whatever. I don't like to focus on the people, you know, like
it's the technology is what you
yeah. So, you know, I have nothing against ultrasound, but the facts are the facts are the facts. And some of these other technologies that are out there that are called generally called functional technologies, find 8 to 12 more per 1,000 women screened. You know, ultrasound, some people say it's 1, some people say it's 3. We settle on the average of 2. You know, there's a zillion studies out there. How many more does it find? And 2 is kind of the average number that gets thrown around. So it's if that's what's on offer for you, you know, and that's what you've got, I wouldn't not do it. 2 is 2, but just know that there could be more out there because that's not a perfect tool either. None of them are perfect.
You say functional technology. What do you mean by that? That could catch you.
There are really kind of 3 things that are out there now floating around. One is a breast MRI, and everybody's heard of MRIs. And so that's an MRI of your breast. And that finds, you know, quite a few more cancers per 1,000 of women. It is said that that's the most sensitive technology. It has higher false positives and higher callbacks as well, but it sees a lot. Okay. And then there's molecular breast imaging, which another part of my story is what I found out about the Mayo Clinic and did my walk, which my book is about, and all that. That's called molecular breast imaging. And it also finds quite a few more. It does it in a different way. So when I say functional technologies, they all use a contrast and they all light up your cancers or your insides in a different way. But a mammogram and an ultrasound, you know, would be more anatomical. They're just looking sort of through the skin at what's there and seeing what they can see. The others use a contrast to show what's happening inside your body. Layman's way of putting it, but generally speaking, that's right. So, you know, there's a world of debate about which ones of those are best to use under what circumstances, you know, and when do you do it and when do you not. who should get them and who shouldn't, all that's out there for debate and is being debated hotly in some cases. But when you've got a standard technology that finds, less than half, really more close to a third, when you've got technologies out there that are needed by some people that aren't getting, that find 300 to 400% more, you're kidding. Right. And here's the kicker about breast density. Not only does it mask cancer being found on mammograms, but it's also an increased risk for breast cancer.
Wow.
So the denser you are, the more likely you are to get breast cancer in the first place. Been documented, studied 40 times from Sunday. It is a fact. So a woman who has extremely dense breasts is 4 to 6 more times likely to get breast cancer than one who has completely fatty breasts. Okay. And so it's kind of a double whammy, right? Mm-hmm. Those women who are more likely to get breast cancer because of their breast density have much less chance of having the cancer be seen.
Yeah, and I hear so much about about breast density, and until you just explained it to me, that the fatty and then versus all the ducts and everything, I wasn't really sure what was the difference in the density of breast. And so, how do you know if your breasts are dense?
Fantastic. The only way to find out is to get a mammogram.
Okay.
So I'm not slamming mammograms at all. I'm just saying get one. That's where you start with your screening. But it may not be where you should be finishing with your screening. Okay. When we put this out on social media, what we'll do is we'll have a picture of the 4 grades of breast density, and we'll put it in the comments so that people can see a good picture of what a really fatty breast looks like on a mammogram, and then what a really dense breast looks like in a mammogram, and then the ones in between, so that it makes this more understandable. But a really fatty one will look black, where you can totally see a white dot if it's there. And the other one will look like just like a cloud, like trying to find a cloud in a cloud. How do you do that, right? And so we'll put that visual out there so people can really see. People can Google it, but I'll give you that picture so that it makes a lot of sense to people when they look at it. Mammogram is the only way. Yeah.
To tell.
It's so interesting because I think Bridget also, I have dense breasts. I think Bridget does.
Nobody's ever told me that.
Oh, every time I'm told.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because when I lived in Florida, they would immediately take me for the ultrasound. It was like a given. And then I moved to Tennessee, and I had to fight for the mammogram and pay for it out of pocket. Or not the mammogram, excuse me, the ultrasound. Yeah, and I would say to them, I have a history of dense breasts. I've had things removed. And they were like, not covered by insurance. So insurance adds a whole nother layer of complexity to this issue for women.
Oh, it really does. It annoys me beyond anything that I could have possibly explained. And it varies. It depends on your plan. It depends on your state. It depends on so many things. And you can call 5 times and get 5 different answers. It depends on who's picking up the phone sometimes. It's crazy. Yes, we need better legislation. We need better coverage for the supplemental screening for women with dense breasts. It should be a no-brainer. We shouldn't have to fight for it. It should be standard of care.
You go to the Mayo Clinic, you find out that you have stage 4 metastatic breast cancer, which in and of itself, I don't know how you wrapped your brain around 8 weeks after an all-clear mammogram. Where had it metastasized to?
Yeah, bones.
Oh, okay. So that's why they found it in the bone density.
Yeah, and they're like, we see something weird in your hip. We'd like you to get an X-ray. And at that point, I was feeling fine. I was like, sure, maybe I've got a little hip degeneration. If I have to get a hip replacement, whatever. It's not that big a deal. I'm like, let's not overdrive, Just went to get the X-ray, and then the operator took one picture. And then she touched my shoulder and she said, "Does it hurt?" And I said,
"Oh gosh,
what hurt?" And that, how they have a little room.
They go back in, yeah.
Go back. She took off
Oh, that's a great feeling.
That just is great for you.
Yeah.
The doctor will call you. You're all good. See that? It was, and I thought it was kind of amusing at the time. But, you know, now that I look back at it, I'm like, well, she knew there was something really wrong. You know, it was easy for her to tell.
And how long did you have to wait from the test, the bone density test, to hearing from a doctor?
The bone density scan?
When did they call you and say, we've got a problem here?
So I think I took the bone density scan like a Tuesday or Wednesday, and the doctor called me Monday morning. He got the word on Friday night, but he called me Monday morning, and he's like, "This is bad. This is probably multiple myeloma." It's because that's what it looked like,
right?
You know, in the bones. And he's like, "I'm sending you to an oncologist right now. This is the most important thing that you have going on right now. I don't care what else it is." So that got my attention. And so that week I got in to the doctor, and then we started multiple myeloma testing. It was all very confusing though, because he's like, "I'm a little off on this because looking at your bone x-ray and seeing that you don't look, act, or feel sick is not a match. Like if all the other, you know, multiple myeloma patients that I see that have bones that look like this are already sick. Like they feel sick."
So yeah,
something didn't compute.
The radiologist was thinking she was hurting you. Yeah.
That's like the worst thing you want to see is a radiologist run for her life. Like, yeah. That's just terrifying. I mean, it's bad enough when you're having an ultrasound and they stop and they keep going over it and over it and over it. And you're saying, well, why are you doing? But to actually kind of go, "Oh, you poor thing," or as they say in the South, "Bless your heart," and then run. I can't even imagine.
Stuff they shouldn't say, and that is part of the trauma that you go through in all this. And here's another story that doesn't completely relate to, well, it relates. So I went and got a CT scan, and the operator said to me, "My only advice to you is to get a CD today of your images, so that when you get a CT next time, you'll know whether your mass has shrunk or grown."
Oh my gosh.
And I was like, "Oh,
mass?
Mass,
yeah.
Mass? Where's my mass? And why do you know about my mass? And I don't even know about my mass.
About my mass.
Like, why are we talking about my mass?"
That's terrifying.
Yeah.
I just...
Oh, man.
It's just like, oh, don't say that stuff like that. You know, like, I haven't been diagnosed yet.
Oh goodness. But you were saying, so, you know, part of that story, and I'm sure you got a lot more of your story to share with us. But I like how you put out the ask, learn, insist, and persist.
Yes.
Which is, you know, so many women, I think that's so important to share, because, you know, we just go home, like just like you said, you go home after that, everything looks good, I'm good, I get this phone call. And we're so overwhelmed by, I get overwhelmed by medical terminology, what's going on with the doctors, and just to hear someone who's gone through this, be an advocate for this. So can you share a little bit about how that went? And it probably will go along with what happened with you through the whole thing.
Yeah. So, you know, now I just know too much. I have to share, right? After 2 years of studying all this stuff, I can't help but wonder, you know, in some weird, twisted way, is this why I was giving this, you know, piece, you know, in order to share it with other people, knowing that there are ways around this. Like, we could do better than we are, but we're not. Okay? If there was no other way to know, if these other tests didn't exist, if this was really all we had, then I would just say, okay, but it's not. It's like the technologies are there. It's right there. It's a possible problem to solve. Okay. So, but I think it's going to take us women advocating for ourselves, asking what our density is. If we have dense breast, insisting on supplemental screening, and making it happen, you know, pushing the system along so that they make that leap into that next way of being that's possible. And so that's what I advocate for. But for all of the literature and studies that are out there about breast density that all say the same thing, a lot of women still don't know if they're dense or not.
Yeah, I mean, I really don't, because they've never said, gee, you have dense breast. And I will be asking that.
Right. So if listeners take away,
one thing,
many things from this, but one, ask if your breasts are dense.
Yes. Yeah.
Ask the questions. Like you said, ask the question.
Right. That's right. I mean, you're right. I mean, if there was one next step to all of this for women everywhere, it's for them to know their density, right? Know if they're dense. And then the next step is to advocate for better screening for themselves. But that first step, you're absolutely right. Find out. If you don't have dense breasts, mammograms are good. Go get your annual, be done, right? But if you are dense, there's more to it. And just that one thing, if everybody did it, would be huge.
It would just that one thing.
A simple thing to do, but you don't know to do it.
Right. Yeah. Learn that you should do it and do it. Absolutely. That would be giant.
Yeah.
So just your diagnosis comes back as primary breast cancer. At that point, what was your course of treatment?
Which I'm still on. So I'm still on the primary, the first thing that we did. So my cancer is estrogen responsive, which well over half of breast cancers are estrogen responsive. So that's common. So the first thing you do is knock out all estrogen in your body. Zip, done. There are about 3, 4, 5 different ways to do that. I'm on a pill called letrozole. Pretty common, cheap. And then on top of that, I take, it's called a CDK4/6 inhibitor. It's a cell growth inhibitor. Okay. There's a lot to it, but that's kind of what it is. And so I take that too. It's advertised on TV. If you watch any TV, it's the one where the tagline is, a lot has changed, but a lot hasn't. Breast cancer drug made from Pfizer called Ibrance.
Okay.
And you take them together. And, it's worked pretty well. About a month ago, I was back up at the Mayo Clinic. I got a sort of a full body PET scan and no obvious activity of any cancer going on.
That's wonderful.
It's not cured. I mean, it's not, it just kind of puts it to sleep.
Okay.
The doctor said, just think of your cancer cells as being in a coma.
Okay. Not out and active and
not active.
Right. Which is what you, at least at the very least, want is that they stay inactive.
Yeah, I mean, if they never wake up and grow again, might be fine. But I don't know. This is a pretty new drug. I don't know what it would be like to be on it for years and years and years. Nobody ever has.
Okay.
Were you required, did you have to get a double mastectomy or just, that's amazing that they didn't.
No, because, I think a couple reasons. And I'm not an expert on this. But the reason you do all these mastectomies and the surgery and the harsh radiation and the harsh chemo and all those things is to keep it from spreading. That's what that's all about. That's what screening's all about. That's what the surgeries and the chemos and all the stuff that women go through is to keep it from getting into the rest of your body. Because you can live without your breasts, but once a cancer attacks a vital organ, right, not going to happen. Yeah. So, but it had already metastasized. It was already all over my bones. So that ship already sailed. And then, so after that point, sometimes it's actually easier to see if, the tumor is shrunk, but if it starts to grow again, since my treatment is systemic, then you might surmise that it's growing other places as well, because systemically it's not working anymore. It's a little easier to see what's going on in your breast than maybe inside a bone or, yeah. So that's the reason I got for that.
Okay.
And that's no fun at all. And I'm just as happy not to have to do that if it's not necessary.
Oh, I mean, I've talked to, we interviewed last year, a woman I know that was pretty young when she was diagnosed, and just hearing about things that most people don't hear about. If you have reconstructive surgery, and when she started talking about the chest expansers or things,
Expanders,
I thought,
yeah.
oh my goodness, yeah.
You know, it's an amputation.
Yeah, it is.
It is.
Just everything she was going through, which it leads me to another question, which I don't know how much you know about this, but there are so many different types of breast cancer that, you know, I'll talk to different friends that have just different types. And I mean, do you have any idea how many types there are? I sure don't know.
No, but what I know, it's a complicated disease. You know, there's progesterone responsive, there's estrogen responsive, like mine. There's HER2, which is a certain, you know, type, and a triple negative, which means none of those. But then within those, there are different gene mutations that happen, which then would dictate what course of treatments will work better than others. So it's super, super nuanced.
Okay. Yes, it is.
And so what I got at the Mayo Clinic was great. Was they actually took a biopsy of the actual, you know, breast tumor, sent it off, and got the mutations that were happening to make it breast cancer. So I know what those mutations are, or at least were then. Hopefully in the future there might be some drug that switches off that from happening. Stop the cancer from going. Theoretically, that's kind of where things are going. I mean,
right, because it seems like a lot of the research is leaning towards individualized treatment, finding out the mutation that you particularly have, and then trying to fight it with that.
Yeah, exactly. And if you could ever figure out, okay, here's this person's combination of mutations, and then you'll make a little cocktail that's, you know, suited to that set. I think that's kind of what they're thinking that they might head toward. I mean, I don't think we're real close to having it to be nearly that cool, but I think they're working on certain ones, you know, that are more prominent than others that can work that way. Yeah. And so I'm in a study actually at the Mayo Clinic called Promise Study that works toward trying to figure some of that out.
It's amazing what they are doing.
They are. Would you recommend, or now, are you're geographically near the Mayo Clinic?
5.5 hours of drive.
Oh, so you're not that close. I mean, you're
close,
but it's not horrible. Because I was going to say, that was my next question. Would you recommend people going to a really renowned research hospital like the Mayo Clinic or the Cleveland Clinic? And I know a lot of people go to MD Anderson. Just a lot of people go to these major hubs. Is that a recommendation you would give someone who's diagnosed?
Well, I mean, not everybody can do it.
Yeah.
Insurance is an issue too. Is it covered to go?
But I get, if you can do it, if you can get there, I don't see how you could go wrong with it.
Okay, with that. Yeah. Which is another question, Colleen, and I don't know, you could interrupt if you have one that's more to what we're talking to right now, but you were talking about insurances and the cost involved. And the woman I interviewed last year, she did not have insurance. And
she had to get creative and find.
She had to get very creative. And luckily someone at one of the places that she went to told her, we live in Tennessee and the girl lives in Tennessee, and told her to call our 10 care, which is typically for children. But I guess if you already have a life-threatening diagnosis, that they will also cover that. So luckily someone in the office told her that. It wasn't out there for her to find easily. It's just someone who worked in that office just said, I need to talk to you. This is what you need to do.
Yeah. Here's my beef with not paying for supplemental screening, like what I'm talking about with the insurance companies.
Yeah.
Because how much cheaper it would be if you found a breast cancer at stage 0, 1, even 2, you know, through what we can do if we try hard enough.
Right.
The cost of that versus treating somebody with stage 4 cancer. So we're now keeping everybody alive longer. But I'm telling you, my medicine is $12,500 a month.
Wow.
Who can afford that? I have good insurance, thank goodness. But what?
Yeah.
I didn't. Somebody's paying it.
Yeah.
Right.
As a whole, all of us are paying it, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, the preventative part, I feel like is so important, you know, just in any healthcare issue.
To prevent, you know, and find things early and nip it in the bud.
Absolutely.
Not to mention what it does for your life. But the cost is phenomenal.
Right. And what you're saying though is here they are trying to cut corners and save costs, and they're spending more money in the long run.
And then they say, well, you can pay for it. It'll go towards your deductible, which is so astronomical. You never actually get to the deductible, you know? So you're like, oh, thank you for letting me pay out of pocket so it can go towards that deductible that I'll rarely ever meet.
And there was just one more thing I want to ask, or any advice to get insurance companies and to get places to have the molecular breast imaging or the MRI. I wrote it down to remember to advocate for. I know we have to be our own advocates. I just don't know if you have any advice for women to really push to get this covered more readily. Yes.
One thing that I've found that works is that the doctor says that it's medically necessary.
Okay.
You know, that you really have to get your doctor to say, you know, this is medically necessary.
Okay.
And it's getting to the point now where just having dense breasts sometimes is enough reason, you know, but they sometimes need to say, if these things aren't covered, you know, and there's pushback that it's medically necessary, then that tends to help.
So that key phrase, but that key phrase should be in women's minds, so they can at least ask their doctor, I'm concerned about this. Is there any way we can make it medically necessary?
Yeah, so medically necessary instead of supplemental, optional.
Gotcha.
Less.
I think that's so helpful. That phrase right there.
Yeah.
Is so helpful. Yeah.
So you get this diagnosis, and I definitely want to go towards your 500-mile walk. But before we get to that point, what was your life like the day of diagnosis versus the weeks following it? What did you do differently? How did you wrap your brain around it?
Yeah, well, I mean, it was, you know, excuse the pun, but it's a tough pill to swallow. I mean, you know, just, you know, I think everybody goes through the, you know, why me? How could this have happened? You know,
did you quit your job? Did you change your diet? Did you?
I mean, I'd always eaten fairly well. I mean, you know, I could lose a few pounds. We all probably could, you know. But I always ate a lot of fruit and vegetables, like them, you know, pretty consistent exerciser. You know, I'm not an Olympic athlete, but you know, I'm out there doing stuff. So, I mean, I got a little better at those things, I would say, but I think the bigger changes were really more mental.
Okay.
You know, in terms of, just started appreciating things more, you know, I started changing my priorities around. And to get some of that straight in my head going forward is why I took the walk, which you alluded to.
Right. So can you speak a little bit about this walk that you did in Spain?
Yeah. So I walked the Camino de Santiago, and that's an ancient Christian pilgrimage. And you can really go from anywhere in Europe all the way, no matter thousands of miles it takes you to get to this one cathedral in the northwest point of Spain. It's supposedly where the bones of St. James the Apostles, of Jesus' bones are. Little iffy on that, you know, this legend or lore or whatever. But that's the story, right? While it is a Christian-based pilgrimage, people of all faiths walk it, or no faith walk it. You know, people do it for spiritual reasons. They do it for a vacation. They do it because they like to hike. They do it because they like Spain. I mean, you know, there's it's just everything out there. And so I just wanted to go and, spend some time alone walking. I've always been a walker. It helps me clear my head. It's kind of therapeutic. And to, just get comfortable with the unknown, because when you're walking something like that, you don't know if you're going to make it. You don't know if you're going to get tired. You don't know what's going to happen. You don't know the way I did it. I didn't know where I was going to stay every night, so there's,
wow.
Giving it up to whatever's going to happen. So I kind of wanted to learn how to do that better. So I went and I didn't plan anything.
Where did you end up staying at night?
Well, they have these, basically they're hostels, but they call them albergues, and they're places for pilgrims only, for the walkers only. You got to have your little credential that you're a walker, and they stamp it, and they're about 10 or 12 euros, and it's a bed and a community bathroom, like 4 or 5 showers to 50 people, dormitory style. And a community meal at night, usually in the place. And that's where I stayed. So you walk as far as you want to walk, and you see a place that you want to stop, and you stop. So that's it. It's a very simple life.
Yeah.
In your book, Probably Benign, you use that walk, you kind of interweave it through the book. Yeah. What did you learn from it? And did it help kind of at the end where you're like, I need to write this down, I need to share it?
Yeah. So, I did the walk as a fundraiser for one of these technologies that we talked about, molecular breast imaging, for a final study that hopefully is going to prove to the world that we need to be doing things like this more, using that technology more. And so that was part of what I was doing while I was walking, is blogging and, asking for donations. People were following me and then they'd donate. And that was pretty cool. But I just thought a lot about so how do I want to spend the rest of my days? Like, who do I want to be, and what do I want to do, and how do I want to do it? And so I just thought a lot about that as the days rolled by. And by the end, I just sort of came to realize that, maybe this is my gift. Maybe this is what I was meant to do. Maybe this is what I was meant to share. Maybe this is my contribution to the world. That I'm going to share what I know, help educate other women, and maybe get them to take that one step that we talked about before. Learn your density, ask about it, right? Then take the next step. And that would be a pretty big contribution.
That would be huge. That would be huge. Yeah. Especially since you're saying 2/3 of women.
Yeah, premenopausal. 2/3 of premenopausal women. That's a lot.
Have dense breasts. Wow, that is amazing.
I would like to. Well, and I would love to know the percentage of those 2/3 that actually know it.
They know that they have dense breasts, because no one's ever, so I don't know. Yeah.
It's way less.
You don't know what you don't know.
That's right. Yeah.
I don't know what that is. That's a good question, but I'm pretty sure it's way less than half, because when I give my talks, when I give my speaking program, part of what I do is say, hey, we're not naming names here, but how many people know their density? And at least half of them will say, I don't know. And yikes.
Which leads to my next thing, is that you do talks. You go out and you do speaking on this. You do in-person or virtual talks and Q&As with this.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah. And we will have all that information on our show notes when we air this episode. And I have your email is your first name at Leslie Ferris Yerger, Yerger, and Ferris is FERRIS.com. She's got on her, you can find her, and you have a website, is that right? I was trying to see where I found your info.
Yeah.
Yes. And it's got her phone number. It's got, everything on there.
A link to the book.
Yes. But yes, everything. And I'm just always so appreciative of the people out there like you that do something like this. When something happens to them, they take this and they spread the word to try to help other people that are going through the same thing. And I'm just so grateful for selfless people like you that do this. So thank you very much. Yes.
Feels good to do it. You know, it energizes me, and that's always a sign, right?
Every time
that you're in the right direction.
I do a podcast, every time I talk to anybody about it, it energizes me. So I like, that's a sign.
Yes,
right.
is.
Exactly. It's true.
Yeah.
And we are really grateful that you had a good PET scan last month.
Thank you.
Yes.
So hopefully those will continue, fingers crossed. And thank you for taking time to speak with us and spreading the word on breast density, breast cancer, and what we need to do as women to advocate for our own health.
Absolutely. It's the most important thing. Your density should be known just like your heartbeat, blood pressure, cholesterol numbers, etc. It's that important.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you so much, Leslie. We appreciate your time. And thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. I enjoyed it. Thanks.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Leslie, for being on our show, for being such a courageous advocate for breast cancer awareness. You know, like she said, dense breast. Do you have dense breast? Do you even know if you have dense breast? Find out. That's step one, so that you know whether you need to go further than just an ultrasound or just the mammogram. And, you know, she talked to Bridget about the insurance, medically necessary. Write those words down somewhere, because with our brain fog after 40, you're going to ask and go, oh, what were those
Put it in your phone notes right now.
Right.
Yeah.
What were those two words? Medically necessary.
Ask your doctor to say that this is medically necessary, and ask about your bone density. Not bone density. Well, ask that too.
Yeah, ask that too.
Ask about your breast density when you have a mammogram, because no one's ever told me that, like I said, and I'm going to ask about that.
You should, yeah. And then update us when you get your mammogram next time.
Yes, which I need to be going soon. Yes.
Oh, there you go. Okay, we'll ask, and then we'll follow up on that. But please follow us on all forms of social media. Our website has information and research and a ton of fun things to look at. So check that out at hotflashescooltopics.com. If you have questions or not sure what to do with the information you see on our show notes, you can always email us at hotflashescooltopics@gmail.com. Join our Facebook group, and again, get a mammogram. It's not perfect, but it's a start.
It's a start. It's a starting point. Yes.
And go from there. So we will talk to you soon.
Bye.